So here's this is just I don't know what got me to. Obviously, this is an important question, but I guess I've taken on an appetite to turn to very local and specific things that you can do in promoting lean within your project or your company or your supply chain, right? So here's my proposal, and I'd love to be able to talk with you about it. So I think every person in the organization should be encouraged. Every person should be encouraged and enabled to make promises that should and can be kept. And we have a process for that we've discussed already, right? The reliable promising process. Right? Analyze breakdowns and develop countermeasures to prevent reoccurrence. And here we have the 5 whys analysis tool. Right? And some of these, of course, are better done with other people, not just by yourself, but they're really by individuals, right? People do these. Improve the way you do your own work, the operations you perform, by mapping and analyzing the steps you take, looking for opportunities to reduce waste and increase value. Right? And one of the things that we can do to help people understand that, well, I'll go into these in more detail in just a minute. And then, so we think about the operations you perform, you do your own work, but we all do our work within processes, right, where there are suppliers and customers, right? And so the next thing we want to teach people to do is how to improve those processes in which they work together, all right? So that's what I propose. So now I've already talked about reliable promising, so let's just look at and the question for you is, are you helping your members of your projects and companies do those things? And I think of everyone, I mean, from CEO to clerk, you know? So where does lean apply? Let's just provide some framing for this. So Pedro gives Maria a soils report. Maria uses the report to design piles. Juan uses Maria's design to fabricate piles. Obviously, this goes on, right? So we have to fabricate them, you have to install them, right? And then you want to do pile caps and put, keep going. So lean applies anywhere human beings are working together to produce something. And we work together to produce things in processes, right? Like the simple one that I've shown here. Processes like the one shown here consist of operations linked together by promises. When either an operation or a process fail, 5 whys can help find countermeasures. One type of failure occurs when someone in the process fails to make a reliable promise. Reliable promising is itself a process, as we've mentioned. So here, I just took this off the web somewhere. So an example of the 5 whys, the problem: physicians are feeling frustrated during office visits. Why is it happening? Physicians don't have the supplies they need. Why is that? Supplies are hard to find. Why is that? Supplies are stored in different places. Why is that? Different people are stocking the supplies in different places. So why is that? There's no standard protocol for supply storage, right? So what we're doing here, what we're looking for when we do a 5 whys analysis is to get to something that is actionable, right? We want to figure out, well, what can we do to solve this problem, right? And that may happen at the 2nd. Why? It might happen at the 5th. It might not happen at the 5th, and you may have to even go on. But experience shows that more often than not, you get there within 5 whys. Right? So, and that you can obviously, this is something that is eminently teachable, right? And so I think of it as part of the responsibility of everyone with supervisory responsibility in an organization, is to teach their people, their direct reports, and to assure that those even below them are taught accordingly by their direct reports, right? Their direct supervisors, right? And that's part of what we call leader standard work, where we're standardizing management in the same way we standardize the work of designing and making. So one of the things that's really helpful in helping people improve how they do their own work is learning to see waste, right? And that's obviously a fundamental concept in Lean. And it was, some of you may know that in the early 1900s, I'm more familiar with the US, but in the US at least, there was a huge focus on waste reduction, right? And not just physical waste, but right, waste of capacity, waste of energy, right? And it reemerged, or perhaps it just went underground like a river, right, and came up somewhere downstream to the surface, but in Toyota, right? And within the Toyota production system, there are three types of waste: Mura, overloading of people or equipment; Mura, unevenness, here, variation, right? And Muda, what is unnecessary and unnecessary for delivery of value. And so this is one of the ways of structuring the list of, of Muda opportunities that's called Tinwood: transportation, inventory, motion, waiting, overproduction, overprocessing, defects, right? And I think it's interesting to note that waiting is workers waiting for work. Overproduction is work waiting for workers. Right? And we tend to, in our industry, to have over-focused on workers waiting for work and under-focused on work waiting for workers. That's one of the reasons why a location-based tax structure is important, because it puts the focus on the priority on advancing the completion, just as we do in an assembly process, making sure that that the object is always being added to, right? Okay, so, and here's another, a very simple one. This is actually from a case study I did on as it happens, there are two different cases here, both involving concrete, precast concrete fabrication and sometimes other types of concrete products. But this was from a company called Spancrete, and they had adopted Lean, and they organized themselves in 13 different groups, starting with primary production, okay, and then all the way up to finance, engineering, marketing, etc. Right? And each of those groups went through a training process where they were introduced to basic Lean concepts and methods. And each of those groups had a steering committee, which included some member of upper management. So this was the first. This is from the first of those groups, and this is Waukesha Wetcast, right? So, and the senior manager on this one was the manager of finance, right? Financial manager. And he learned a lot. So, but what they did was they taught people how to identify waste and to measure it in their own processes. And they did it. They did it with themselves, watching themselves. And they discovered that a high, I don't remember the exact numbers right now, but a high percentage of their time was spent looking for tools and materials. And so one of their solutions was to use this shadow boards and a materials box, if you will, that was replenished periodically on a max-min basis. Right? So it got to a certain level of consumption, it was replenished to the maximum, etc. Right? And so this applies the rule: a place for everything and everything in its place. Right? Excuse me, I'm gonna see if I can get my voice back. And there's more to be said about this case, but I won't do it. Okay. So now this is looking at the problem, how do we improve processes? And this was from a work I did with a firm called Malling Precast Products, I think they were called. And they're a subsidiary of what's now known as Lang O'Rourke. And at that time, it was just O'Rourke. But what you see, this is, you read about and hear about value stream mapping, right? And that has some uses, but it doesn't really do, it's an initial step to identify where you have opportunities for improvement. But I really like the term material and information flow diagram because it more accurately describes what's going on, right? So if you look at the upper right corner, customers, so everything involves customers and suppliers, right? So a customer makes a request, essentially. It goes to factory production control. They coordinate for supplies of external materials, rebar supplier, lumber supplier, and then couplers and rebar, right? And then they also, so they're not just arranging material flow, but also arranging information flow. So cell production, we applied a manufacturing cells concept to the production of similar products, right? And so you can see that there's I won't go much further on it, but there's a combination, as is usual in any modestly complex process, there's a combination of mechanisms for the release of work between workstations, let's say. And that's push, pull, and continuous flow, right? And so we want to, my way of saying that is we want to flow when you can, pull when you can't, push when you must. Okay, right? And so the release of the next three drawings is a kind of push, right? So that goes to the carpenter doing work on forms, right? It goes to the Dylan, who was making the couplers, right? And then it goes to the steel fixers who were cutting and bending steel for the cages that were going to be put where concrete's going to be placed. And so it goes all the way around through the entire process, and you can see it's loaded. We know how many people are going to be doing what, what times are allowed, and so forth, right? And what they were using previously was they were really organized by discipline, right? So there was batching, placing, and so forth. And we reorganized around product types, shear walls, floor elements, columns, beams, right? Stairs, that kind of thing. And the simple, I think I just say it, don't have it. Okay, yeah. Okay, so I developed this process and tested it with two production cells for floor elements and for shear walls. And for shear walls, we tripled production without changing anything except the way work moved through the process. Okay. For floor walls, we doubled it, and we ran out. We didn't have any more forms. So, yeah. So, any rate, I think this can be taught. I think this can be taught. There are different types of diagrams depending upon the type of process you're talking about. You might be better suited to use like an interaction flow diagram, where you have down the left-hand side, you might have the different players who participate and share in a process. Say, for example, collecting accounts due, right? And so, and that would look quite different than this production process, this manufacturing process. But you're still doing the same thing. You're trying to figure out how to make the work flow and move forward in accordance with lean principles. Right? So that's what I think. Those four things. If everyone did those four things, your organizations would work better.